Shedeur Sanders may have already won this quarterback competition. Not officially, not publicly, not according to any depth chart that's been released, but the people inside that building, the ones who watch every rep, every drop, every decision, they're not hiding it well anymore. And the strange part, the conversation is still being framed like Deshaun Watson is the incumbent, like he's the guy they're protecting, like Shedeur is the long shot with something to prove. But Coach Lance Reisland just sat down and described a quarterback who's processing faster, trusting his feet, and commanding the offense, and he wasn't talking about Deshaun. Colin Cowherd finally admitted Shedeur should be the starter, then immediately tried to give Deion Sanders the blame for it. By the end of this video, you're going to understand something the mainstream NFL media keeps dancing around. The receipts are already in, the organizational signals are already moving, and once you see what coaches, front office language, and even Colin's own words are actually telling you, you won't be able to unsee it. This isn't a prediction. This is a translation.
What's going on, YouTube? This is Mad Dog TV coming back with another one. Browns insider Coach Riz just set the record straight about Shedeur Sanders. We also have Colin finally admitting that Shedeur Sanders should be the starter, but blames Deion Sanders, and we have the receipts to prove why that's incorrect. Money Man, you already know it.
Most people think the Shedeur Sanders story started at the NFL draft. It didn't. It started in Boulder, Colorado, on an offensive line that gave him zero chance. Picture it. You're a quarterback trying to develop timing, rhythm, trust in your progressions. But before you can even finish a single read, you're running for your life. The pocket collapses before it forms. Your receivers never have time to finish their routes. Your only option, every single play, is scramble or die. That's not a development environment. That's survival mode. And yet the outside world watched those Colorado games and said, Shedeur has happy feet. Shedeur holds the ball too long. Shedeur doesn't process fast enough. They diagnosed the symptom and completely missed the wound. Coach Pat Shurmur figured it out. He built an offense around getting the ball out fast, not because Shedeur couldn't process, but because the line couldn't protect. He manufactured solutions to cover the structural failure underneath them. Shedeur learned to operate in chaos. He learned to survive without protection. He learned what it feels like to make decisions under maximum pressure. And then he got to the NFL. And for the first time in his career, he started getting pass protection. He started getting time. And that's when something changed.
Well, everybody talks about the idea of he's got to process faster. And I go back to when he was at Colorado, when he's in Jackson State, he hasn't had much of an offensive line. And they did a really nice job, I think, Pat Shurmur, when he was at Colorado, of figuring out ways to get the ball out of his hand very, very quickly. Now he gets to the NFL, and he's going to start getting pass protection now, and he's going to start getting these things. So he's kind of had to learn on the run, not because he can't do it. Shedeur Sanders is very intelligent. Now, I always tell people the fastest way to...
Coach Lance Reisland doesn't traffic in hype. He watches tape. He breaks down mechanics. He calls what he sees. And what he saw was this: a quarterback whose brain is finally operating in sync with his body. The phrase he used was precise. He said Shedeur's ability to trust where he's going with the ball is now going to his feet. That's not a compliment about athleticism. That's a diagnosis of a quarterback who has crossed a threshold. When a QB knows where he's going before the snap, when the progression is automatic, the feet respond. They don't drift. They don't stutter. They go where they need to go because the mind has already made the decision. Happy feet isn't a physical problem, it's a mental one, and Reisland is telling us the mental problem is gone. Andrew Berry, the GM, sat down and said Shedeur had an excellent spring, called the past 6 to 10 weeks a phenomenal stretch of work. Now read that again. The general manager of an NFL franchise, not the PR department, not a beat reporter, is voluntarily going out of his way to praise a fifth-round rookie quarterback, publicly, by name, in specific terms. That's not standard operating procedure. GMs protect their starters. They manage narratives. They don't hype the backup unless the backup is quietly becoming something they didn't expect. When was the last time a fifth-round pick forced an NFL franchise to admit the quarterback competition is genuinely undecided? Think about what that admission actually costs them.
Well, the fastest way to improve your feet is to improve your brain and know where you're going with the football. Because if you know where your progressions are, you know where to move your feet to. If you don't have an idea where your progressions are, sometimes quarterbacks will drift, or sometimes quarterbacks will get happy feet, the term you've heard. But the more confident you are with where you're supposed to be and where your 1, 2, 3 check down is and things like that, the better your footwork becomes, right? Because you now know where everybody is versus a certain coverage and where you need.
It creates instability. It creates media noise. It puts Deshaun Watson, a $230 million guaranteed contract, in an awkward public position. Organizations don't absorb that cost by accident. They absorb it because the alternative, pretending there's no competition, became impossible to maintain. Shedeur made it impossible. He broke Tom Brady's rookie merchandise sales record. That's not just a marketing number. That's a signal of cultural weight. That's an organization understanding that this player has a gravitational pull that extends beyond football. In organizations, especially ones trying to rebuild fan trust after years of dysfunction, they notice that. Think about it from Deshaun Watson's point of view for a second. You are a franchise quarterback. You have a guaranteed contract unlike anything in NFL history. You've been through years of legal scrutiny, public narrative battles, and a full season and a half of injury absence. You come back to camp, you're healthy, you feel good, everyone around you is saying the right things. And then, a fifth-round rookie from Colorado starts making the coaching staff pause. That pause is an identity threat, not a physical one, a psychological one. Because Deshaun Watson's entire self-concept, the way he understands his value, his place in the organization, his reason for being there, is built on being QB1. The moment that identity becomes uncertain, the body responds before the brain processes it. Overthinking, second-guessing, trying to prove instead of just play. Now look at Shedeur. His pressure signature is the opposite. Every quote, every observer, every inside voice coming out of that facility says the same thing. He's confident. He's commanding. He's not trying to win the job. He's playing like he already has it.
A lot of talk around this quarterback room, obviously the race being tightly contested between Deshaun and Shedeur. Do you see it that same way? And what does tightly contested mean? Because I think for some people, tightly contested means Shedeur would have had to play better than Deshaun and make up some of that ground, and some people take it at face value if both guys are playing at relatively the same level.
Well, I would say this, going back to what you said before, when people say I'm optimistic, I truly believe it, Jake, and I think you know me after a couple of years now. I truly believe these quarterbacks can do this. And
that's perceived locus of control, the belief, embodied, not just stated, that the outcome is in your hands. Players who operate from that belief process faster, they move better, they make decisions without hesitation. Coach Reisland wasn't just describing Shedeur's footwork, he was describing his mindset. And in an NFL quarterback competition, mindset is the variable that breaks ties. Now look at the organization's psychology. What is the Cleveland Browns front office showing right now? Commitment behavior or hedge behavior? They're praising Shedeur publicly. They're letting the competition narrative breathe. They're not protecting Watson the way a franchise does when they've already decided. That's not a hedge. That's a lean. And organizations that lean, even quietly, rarely come back the other way. Now here's where people are going to disagree with me, and that's fine. Some people hear tightly contested quarterback race and think it means both guys are even, that the incumbent has a slight edge, that the rookie just needs to not embarrass himself. But Coach Reisland told us what tightly contested actually means. He said, it comes down to who has better command, who moves the ball better, who limits their mistakes. Those aren't metrics that favor a veteran returning from injury. Those are metrics that favor a quarterback playing with clarity and conviction. Now translate the press conference language. When offensive coordinator Tommy Munkin talks about Shedeur learning the offense, accepting teaching, executing the system, he's not describing a project. He's describing a quarterback who assimilated faster than expected.
That's what I tell you a lot.
That Shedeur Sanders broke Tom Brady's record for most merchandise sold. I said it's very Tim Tebow, but he can actually play. I don't think Shedeur Sanders is a bad kid. I think he's a little immature, a little silly for my taste, but I think he's got real talent. And I think he was underdrafted in the 5th round. I said, at worst, late 2nd. I think he can play. I think he's big enough, accurate enough, mobile enough.
When the head coach refuses to name a QB1 going into training camp, that's not indecision. That's an organization that is already decided and isn't ready to absorb the public fallout of saying it out loud. When Andrew Berry uses the word phenomenal to describe a rookie QB's offseason, that's not accidental language. GMs choose their words. Every word in a press conference is measured. The translation? They believe in this kid more than they're allowed to say right now. There are 52 other men in that building watching this play out. Some of them came here to win with Deshaun Watson. They bought into that story. They restructured contracts, absorbed the narrative baggage, stayed loyal when loyalty wasn't easy, and now they're watching a rookie from Colorado force the conversation. The ones who stay quiet and keep working, those are the ones who see something. Players don't rally around quarterbacks they don't believe in. They don't compete hard in practice for a guy who isn't going to be there in October. Watch who the skill players gravitate toward. Watch who gets the locker room energy. That tells you more than any depth chart. If Shedeur Sanders becomes QB1 in Cleveland, this team is not a 2-win team. Cowherd said it himself, 6, 7, 8 wins. He called Cleveland's roster genuinely talented. He said they have an offensive coach. He said he believes. Then he tried to qualify it by throwing shade at Deshaun, but the football opinion was real. A young quarterback with command, with tools, with an elite offensive line that he's never had before, operating in an offense built around getting the ball out fast, which is exactly what he was trained to do at Colorado. That's not a project, that's a fit. In 3 years, when we look back at the 2025 Cleveland Browns season, this minicamp, this specific stretch of OTAs, is going to be the inflection point. Either this is the moment a franchise finally stopped cycling through veteran saviors and committed to building something real, or it's the moment an organization got seduced by a narrative and made a catastrophic mistake. One of those two things is true. We just don't know which one yet. Remember what we said at the top? Shedeur Sanders may have already won this quarterback competition. They just haven't told anyone yet. The coaches are telling you. The front office language is telling you. Even Colin Cowherd, who tried to make it about Deion, couldn't hide the football opinion underneath the shade. He already knows. Because underneath all of it, underneath the comp analysis and the press conference translations and the merchandise numbers, there's a kid who was written off before he got to Canton, Ohio, who was told his dad hurt his draft stock, who went in the 5th round despite tape that said 2nd, who inherited an identity built in someone else's shadow, and then quietly, rep by rep, started becoming something that couldn't be ignored. The outside world gave him every reason to doubt himself. He didn't. And now the organization that was never supposed to draft him has to decide if they believe what their own eyes are showing them. So here's what I want to know. Is Shedeur Sanders the legitimate answer in Cleveland, or is this a narrative that's gotten too far ahead of the actual football? Drop it below. I'll be reading every single one.